I've decided to make little mini series within the show that would basically cover one particular area of interest of mine. And this one's going to be focused on payment gateways, EMIs, and other financial organizations that are innovating in one way or the other, or even if not innovating at a global scale, at least bringing some of the already globally well adopted innovations to our local market that where they have been pretty much alien to most of us. And today's featured guests are founders of one such organization. Whenever I speak with startup founders and freelancers, and also when it comes to my own experience doing business here, one of the biggest woes that I have faced, and one of the biggest woes that most of the people in my circles have faced, has been the lack of viable payment gateway solutions for their business or for their freelancing career over here. In our second episode, which was the first FinTech Focus one, we discussed how Safepay can help in that regard when it comes to freelancers and their problems like direct client invoicing and the ease of receiving payments from their clients from abroad. Today's startup is going to focus more on helping other organizations automate their payment processing, automate their entire payment collection processes utilizing a modern and highly integratable gateway. When it comes to payment gateway solutions that are already available over here, they are downright dismal. And even though when the telcos decided to launch their own variants, that seemed like a promising idea, but over time it proved to be just as bad as the gateways offered by most of our conventional banks. And we badly needed something along the lines of Stripe or 2Checkout, or something that feels like you're not operating in the financial stone age. So today's featured organization, today's featured startup is a provider of one such gateway service. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to my guests for today, Raza Naqvi and Ziad Parekh, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So let's start with Ziad. Hello, Ziad. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me, Arun.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. So yeah, you gave a pretty good introduction. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Karachi, did my high school there, everything, and then came to the US to study. So I did my undergrad in math and econ from Cornell, and pretty much moved into the kind of startup space right after I graduated. I worked for a company in New York City before moving to the Bay Area in 2015, where I'm currently dialing in from. I've been in San Francisco for the past 5 years doing software development for different tech companies, and around about 12 to 14 months ago, I would say, started working on Safepay as a side project, just to kind of explore the space and see what can be done. And yeah, ever since then, just kind of it started to take over more and more of my life until I had to quit my job, and now I'm just committed to this full time.
That's awesome. And yeah, most successful startups are formed like that. You identify a problem that you want to solve and you just start solving it. And then before you know it, you have a solution that's viable enough for you to quit your day job or quit whatever you were doing in order to focus full time on that. So kudos on that. And Raza, welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Of course. Thank you for having both of us, Harun. So my name is Raza. I'm the co-founder of Safepay. My background is similar to Ziad's to the extent that we both grew up in Karachi. So we've known each other for over 25 years, went to the same school. For university, I went to the United Kingdom. I studied law at university, and I trained to practice as a lawyer after that. So I kind of specialized in banking and financial regulation law. I was working in London at a large kind of international law firm. Ziad and I, just to kind of give you some context, had always kind of just kind of based on our previous relationship. And when he kind of decided to look into Safepay, he kind of reached out to me to see if I was able to kind of advise him on some of the initial kind of structuring things which come up when you're thinking of any business. And then just based on that, we kind of put our heads together and then thought, like, how can we actually get it to the position where both of us can focus on it on a full-time basis. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell my story.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for sharing that. It's always great to see old friends join together to build something where the skill sets that each of them brings complements whatever the other one is already bringing to the table. And yes, there's very little we can accomplish on our own. So having the right partner, having the right co-founder is absolutely one of the most crucial parts of starting a business. So I'm glad that you guys have that sort of harmony where you do complement each other. One of you brings all of the business and legal skill set, and the other one is primarily the engineering and coding guru. And yes, that's a complementary combination for sure. So why FinTech? Why tackle this market? And what was your primary reason to tackle this challenge, considering it's a very hostile market to enter for anything innovative because of all the red tape, bureaucracy, and even apart from the red tape bureaucracy, I call it the babon wala mindset. Babuon wala and babon wala jo mindset hai. So with that sort of a challenge, what drove you to enter this industry?
Great question. So I was in college around about the time when Stripe and Braintree in the US were just starting to take off. And I was able to see how they were enabling businesses like Uber and Lyft and Instacart and Airbnb, all of these businesses to kind of just expand and take off. Because without a payment solution that was developer friendly, that was modern in its offerings, these businesses would probably not have had the technology to kind of scale the way they did.
Oh, yes.
And for me at the time, I was always wondering why, these businesses hadn't thought of expanding into Pakistan yet, and B, why there wasn't an existing solution in Pakistan, given, the talent that we have in the country. If someone can, I'm sure people can kind of build something in Pakistan for the Pakistani market. But I think, as you mentioned, the red tapeism, the high barrier to entry, and just the confusion surrounding the whole kind of regulatory landscape around fintech is scary enough to deter people to go down this route. Luckily for me,
Yes.
I pretty much didn't understand the regulations. I just ignored it, and I was like, all right, let's just focus on this problem from like a technical standpoint and see what I can do sitting in the US. So yeah, I pretty much, I would say that I just ignored the whole regulatory landscape and just focused on the tech. And just because I figured that something like this could enable startups to thrive in Pakistan, there was already a big need for something like this, just based on different conversations happening on Facebook groups. Everyone was, of the mindset that, it was a part of like a failure on the government's part to not have PayPal in the country.
Oh,
So,
yes.
right. So I
Immense
thought,
failure.
yeah, which is fine. I mean, PayPal deciding to come to the country is their choice,
Oh,
but
yes.
I've thought that it was time that someone took ownership of this problem and tried to do something about it. So I thought maybe I'd take my shot at it.
And yes, PayPal deciding whether or not to come here is, of course, their prerogative, but providing them with the peace of mind that they're not going to be committing a blunder by coming here. That is the responsibility of our regulators. And with the FATF blacklist, with the risk of getting blacklisted always looming, especially like when you're in the gray list, there's only one way that you're more than likely to go after getting into the gray list, and that's the blacklist, especially when nothing else is working out for you in terms of well, that's a long story. So you get the point, you get the drift. So fortunately, our blacklisting has been sort of avoided. We've been skirting around it so far, and I've been sort of keeping track of the progress in that regard as well. And so we're doing pretty okay for a change in that regard. We've I think ticked off a majority of their concerns, and the way things look currently, by sometime in 2021, if things go as planned, we might just end up in the whitelist as well. And that brings me to the next scenario. So if we end up in the whitelist, then many players that were previously reluctant from entering the market, they would definitely enter the market by then. So I think the time when you guys decided to enter the market was perfect. You couldn't have chosen a better time, because there's practically little to no competition when it comes to quality competition. I mean, gateways from the banks can't compete with an agile startup gateway provider, because their process takes like 6 months and God knows how many steps of bureaucracy to just initiate. And with the likes of EasyPay and Jazz Cash gateways, you just don't even hear back from them after applying until it's been several months. At times you just don't hear back at all if they don't deem you worthy enough of investing their time and effort to onboard you. So there's that. And in this being penny wise pound foolish, in this attitude, they often miss out on clients who might not exactly be a good fit in terms of volume for now, but like imagine if you empower them at the stage where they need you the most, then they're going to be your loyal customers when they've grown and when they can afford to have anyone work with them. So in their extreme short-sightedness, our local providers have just been focusing on onboarding clients who have a huge volume. Like a startup cannot commit to transactions of, let's say, 5 million a month when they're just starting up. In fact, for the initial few months, they might only get the gateway integrated into the system and not even have a single transaction coming in. So, and our institutions have just refused to facilitate them. So, on this note, what are your plans for facilitating very early stage startups, or even sort of freelancers who are trying to transition into building their own company, and they don't really have anything in terms of like no incorporation, no documentation to show? Do you have any process of helping them on board? Because they're often clueless. All they know is they need something that works with their WooCommerce installation and lets them invoice their customers and or sell their products.
Yeah, I can take that one, Ziad.
Yes, please.
So, Arun, great observations. It's that you've kind of cited some of the reasons why Safepay is a really good fit for this market, and it kind of leverages off the founding kind of philosophy behind, when we launched it officially, like in May of 2019. We definitely saw a gap as far as kind of small, medium-sized businesses were involved, as well as individuals. So just in terms of kind of our pricing strategy as well, it's completely transparent. We don't have any upfront fees. We don't have a kind of volume commitment. We don't have annual fees charged as well. We only take like a certain amount based on a successful transaction. And we found that actually resonates with a lot of our customers. And when we're having that conversation, so Pakistani customers in general are quite price conscious, and they do kind of want to negotiate the rate. But when we can mention the way we've structured it, just being a one-off fee based on the successful transaction, they're quite responsive to that. So that's one kind of practical way in which we've tried to reduce the barriers for startups or any other business that wants to start accepting online payments. On the other point you raised in relation to new kind of economic actors that are looking to accept online payments. So there are certain kind of requirements that we have in terms of the businesses that can use or individuals that can use Safepay. So the minimum is that you be a sole proprietor, for example. And I take your point that many people are kind of clueless as to what the kind of regime is and how to go about it. But truth be told, having operated for a year now, the process for registration as a sole proprietor is quite straightforward in terms of kind of liaising with the FBR to get that NTN in relation to it. And it opens up a whole kind of host of benefits for your business to begin with, in terms of your annual tax filings, etc. So again, in terms of us trying to enable people or businesses that haven't really thought about taking online payments or kind of dissuaded from it at the outset, our kind of advice is that go down the sole proprietorship route. It just makes your life a lot easier in terms of kind of developing any formal relationship with any kind of, whether it be a vendor, whether it be another third party with which you're entering into a contract, and certainly with the Safepay, for example, as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And so I wasn't aware of this, that you were accepting applications from sole proprietors as well, and this is amazing because like a freelancer can very easily register as a sole proprietor and benefit from payment gateway as well as other tax benefits, as you mentioned. And it also helps better document whatever remittances they're earning. And also, in my own experience, once you give a sort of a business-like structure to even your solo gig, even your solo contractor work, you have more of an incentive to start hiring a team. You have more of an incentive. You get that sort of a drive कि यार अभी business का एक नाम रख लिया है या business को एक किसी तरह से एक register कर लिया है, तो अब next step क्या होता है? Employee hire कर. So that sort of puts you on the path of entrepreneurship that you may currently not be on, and that's always a great thing. अच्छा, अभी और कुछ मेरे पास इस सेशन के स्टार्ट होने से पहले भी इस सब्जेक्ट पे there were several questions from some of my friends, some of the people in my circles who have always been complaining to me about lack of payment gateways. In fact, just to give you a bit of background on how I resolved my payment gateway issue, I just couldn't be bothered with the red tape. I couldn't be bothered with all the ridiculous paperwork requirements that exist over here locally, and I couldn't be bothered with बैंकों के चक्कर लगाओ, जैज कैश या वो इजी पे में कोई कॉन्टैक्ट ढूंढ के मिलते तरले करो कि यार भाई गेटवे दिला दें. So I just incorporated in the US as a Delaware C Corp and got Stripe and with Silicon Valley Bank account. Now I've got Mercury as well. So that's how I decided to finally, after suffering for well over a decade since I started working in the industry. Well, I started working couple of decades back, लेकिन ज़्यादा मुझे जो पेमेंट के issues आते थे, they started around a decade back when I seriously started working for foreign clients. And मेरी तो बस हो गई थी. So I was like, I've given up on whatever's being on offer here right now. But then it's never too late. And I'm really, really glad to see you guys as well as Sadapay, and then there are a couple of other EMIs also all set to enter the market. And especially with you guys in Sadapay, I really like how one of you is focusing on payment gateways, and while the other one is focusing on best facilitating freelancers with things like direct client billing and the ease of issuing invoices and getting those invoices paid. So when it comes to what you're specializing in, I understand that currently you're offering integrations with platforms like WooCommerce and Magento. Am I correct in that?
Yep.
What other integrations are you offering for anyone who onboards right now?
So our philosophy has always been to kind of go to where the merchant is. Early on, we found that WordPress WooCommerce was probably the most popular platform being used in Pakistan and probably the easiest one to build a plugin for. So that's where we went first. But now we support WordPress, Magento 1 and 2, OpenCart, WHMCS, and Shopify, as well as our own kind of API that you can use to build custom integrations. And around that API, we've built several SDKs that make interacting with that API easier. So we have one in PHP for like Laravel users, because PHP is a very popular programming language in Pakistan. Node.js is emerging now, and people are starting to really use it. So we have an SDK for Node. Very soon we'll have one for Android and iOS as well, so people can start building native kind of in-app payment experiences. So we're really excited about how the developer community is kind of springing up and really taking advantage of all of these options.
Excellent. That's delightful to hear. When it comes to WordPress-based integrations, you mentioned WooCommerce. Is there any other popular plugin in the WordPress ecosystem with which you've also integrated? For example, when it comes to use cases, I often have clients for which I implement this use case that we just set up a form using one of the most popular WordPress form plugins called Gravity Forms. Like when it comes to integrations, that is probably the best integrated form plugin over the internet, not just in the WordPress ecosystem. It like integrates with anything you name it in the WordPress ecosystem, and quite a few things outside the WordPress ecosystem. So the way we set things up is we set up a form with all the required fields, conditional logic that may do calculations to come up with the final number based on whatever configuration or whatever service combination the visitor chooses. And at the end, when the result is calculated, they can just click pay now, and the payment gateway would process it. Stripe integrates with it, PayPal, and most other common payment gateways integrate. So do you integrate with either Gravity Forms or any other major form plugin in the WordPress ecosystem right now?
So no, I didn't know about Gravity, to be honest. So thanks for bringing that up. I think if it's as popular as you're saying it is, it's something that we'll probably get to very shortly.
Oh yes, because that's gonna, like, at times a lot of vendors, they don't really need an e-commerce solution at all. All they need is a form with conditional logic and multiple steps where people can just, just the way you would configure a laptop if you buy it online.
Oh, awesome!
You select the RAM, you select the processor, you select whether you want it with Windows or with whatever software. You select the graphics card and all, and based on that, the price is calculated, and then there's a checkout. But like for most of those shops, they're sending a lot of such products, so they're using a full-fledged e-commerce system. But for a service provider who might just be selling a bunch of services for just one form is enough. Like, let's say a web development service where on a single form, a customer can pretty much provide all the information and get the whole basically invoice generated that they can then pay. So it will be lovely if you guys can come up with something in that regard. And another use case that a good friend of mine asked me to ask you guys whenever I had you live with me was subscriptions and memberships. So essentially recurring payments. So do you have?
We get that a lot. We have plans to build that into our core offering. It's something that we want to work on, but we want to make sure we do it correctly in a way that's suitable for the local market. There are issues with directly billing a Pakistani credit card, because you know how currently you have the whole 3D authentication process with the one-time passcode going before you can authorize a payment. Recurring billing will kind of move that into the background. So we're trying to think of kind of the best way to bring this into the market. So our philosophies around whenever we launch products has never been to do anything like in a rush or too quick. We always focus on the right experience, the right how to integrate it with whatever we're currently offering. It does take some time, but we're confident that when we do release something, it's always like the best in the market and meets the high bars we set for ourselves as well. So stay tuned. We will be launching that hopefully soon. Oh,
that's great. That's great. So now let's come to some of the business aspects. So, Raza, what's the go-to-market strategy that you have, considering first and foremost uh, uh, um, the whole licensing scenario? I think you guys were, like, when I last checked, you were operating under sort of a trial period by like the regulators or something along the lines, where you can't really run full-on marketing campaigns till some sort of approval. So would you correct me if I'm wrong in that regard? Have
Sure.
you guys got the full approval to go full steam ahead in terms of your go-to-market strategy?
So that's an interesting question, and I don't blame you for having kind of some blurred understanding of this, because Ziad and I, like, since launch, we've been discussing this. So technically, what we're doing is an aggregation service, in the sense that the money that is processed through Safepay will settle with our acquiring bank at the back end. So in its purest form, there isn't really a regulation in Pakistan to govern just this scenario. So again, just to highlight the difference between what we're doing and what a Safepay would be doing, is whereas Safepay is going to be a neo-bank of sorts, will be accepting deposits and the other kind of interesting things that banks can do. That is what requires the kind of licensing regime under what the current framework is. Whereas with us, our kind of, we are leveraging off the payment gateway which is provided by the Visa network, and that's globally available. We have an acquiring bank at the back end, which is a regulated entity, of course. And then again, when we onboard a merchant, we do comply with what's called the digital merchant onboarding rules, which were published by the SPP at the tail end of last year. That being said, we've had conversations with the regulator in a very open way, so that they're aware of what we're doing. But it's a good question you've raised, because again, in our kind of business model, there are limits to just being involved in this space in terms of processing the payment only. If you spoke to any bank, that's from actually lending and taking deposits, and then the interest, how much you have to pay out and whatnot. So from that perspective, I mean, I hope that gives you a bit more clarity in terms of how we're going about things at the moment. So in terms of a go-to-market strategy, we've relied mostly on inbound interest. If anything, Safepay is just, as Ziad mentioned, when it initially launched, it was launched on these startup groups on Facebook, which have quite a large following here, actually, and some pretty good commentary. So some of them are like Pakistan startups, some of the more software-focused ones. Decades is another one. So people like yourself, as well as your friend group, who've asked you to ask us questions. And I'd encourage, after this conversation, feel free to make a WhatsApp group, and Ziad and I can join that, and we'd love to kind of hear more ideas, because our ethos for setting up Safepay wasn't really to kind of originally, at least, it wasn't to kind of create this pioneering monopoly of payments in Pakistan. It was essentially to solve a problem that existed, and also create a company that kind of can respond to demands and use cases from users in the future. So we love hearing feedback in terms of the platform as it is right now, in terms of how we can branch out from what we're doing to further facilitate the kind of startup ecosystem as well as bigger businesses than just startups. So yeah, I mean, as the business develops, the idea is that we would like to onboard kind of larger clients as well, but for now, our kind of focus is on exactly the people who you've said are ignored by the kind of original, the incumbents, whether they be a bank, whether they be a telco, because we just think that to encourage entrepreneurial Pakistan, you need a kind of service like Safepay. And Ziad and I kind of personally, because we've grown up here and we're very passionate about Pakistan and the tech ecosystem over here as well. And we want to encourage that in as many ways as we possibly can. So we're always kind of open to hearing, hearing from our current merchants, and then people who want to use the service as well, or those who are just generally interested in the fintech space.
Yeah, and
Lovely.
just to tie to your earlier point about the incumbents in the system, and how they kind of tend to take a backseat. That is the general view of the market. Like, they are very slow to respond and generally ignore inbound emails when you ask for their services. But to be honest, I think without them being where they are and building what they have to date, Safepay would not have existed. So we are obviously a solution that's standing on the infrastructure already laid out by the work that institutions like banks, like mobile wallet providers have built and established in the market. So they have now kind of, reached a point where they can focus on what they want to focus, probably. So it's just like where we stand right now is because of innovations that have come before us. And pretty much that's, in my opinion, how I feel any country tends to evolve. You build on top of what's already been built, and you stand on the shoulders of giants, as to say. So they've kind of made inroads with the state bank, and together, the entire country has kind of formed certain regulations and rules that are moving the country towards a faster digitization. And I also feel the state bank is doing its part to kind of lower the barrier to entry for innovative companies to come into the market and help them achieve their goal of digitizing payments in Pakistan as well. So it's super exciting to see all the innovation happening, especially over the last 3 years. It's just been a flurry of companies and cool products that are coming out, and we're lucky to kind of be a part of this now.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of opportune time to just mention that in the fintech kind of term, we see ourselves more as a tech company than on the financial side. So we want, where, as Yad's mentioned, we're kind of leveraging off the technology that already exists and kind of building it with the Pakistani context in mind. So Harun, for example, you mentioned about gravity forms. That's definitely something which we've noticed over here. Not everyone needs a full-blown e-commerce. All they really need is a form with, as you mentioned, kind of conditional items within it, and that kind of gets them there. They just need a way to capture the payment, essentially. And just to build on the point that Ziad just raised, many of who are technically our competitors and the banks and telcos, they've actually done a lot of hard work over the last decade to get us to a point where Safepay can enter into the ecosystem and make make the lives easier for customers.
Yes, I agree that a lot has been done by them, to the extent where you guys or several other EMIs that are up and coming right now, they feel comfortable investing their money, their time, their effort in building something on top of those foundations. My gripe with them has always been more along the lines of not providing easy onboarding facilities to those who need the most help with onboarding, and essentially the marginalized founders of unfunded early stage startups and freelancers who want to sort of near for the next 3 and then facing issue with the next client not really accepting, not really wanting to pay via one of these because they just don't feel comfortable with it. And then every single week, I've seen several posts by people around me in the community telling about how because of the lack of an easy way to just accept credit card payments or PayPal, using a link that they can just share with the client where they can just pay. I mean, it needs to be as simple as that. So not having that has literally suppressed innovation by suppressing by putting like a glass ceiling on the volume, or rather the efficiency of payment processing that you can have while working from Pakistan. And I've personally had project opportunities slipped right through my fingers because the client wasn't comfortable paying via any other method, and they just wanted to pay through either PayPal or a recognizable credit card based payment form, like what's offered by Stripe to checkout and all. So like it just hurts me whenever I think of it that over the past decade and a half or so, when other countries like Bangladesh, India, Philippines, where we've seen a lot of improvements in the lifestyles of the grassroots level people who have just been hustling using tech. So they've had the advantage of having access to efficient modern payment methods that we haven't had, and that has just prevented many people from maybe converting their freelance gigs into a full service agency. I know a lot of people have struggled through it and done it one way or the other, but then there are many who do get discouraged enough by the hurdles that they decide it's not for them.
Yeah.
So and then in terms of e-commerce, we unless you can get a gateway, you just can't really sell on your site, and you can't really do COD with several types of target audiences. Especially you can't really sell services via COD, obviously, not even locally, and you can't sell products abroad via COD either. So imagine if we had easy onboarding gateways available a decade back, what our people would have achieved over just this decade. And it always really hurts me, but I'm again really glad that you guys are doing this. Some other people are also set to do this, and market is big enough to have some healthy competition, so the more the merrier. How do you see players like you impacting our economy over the next, let's say, 5 years?
That's a great question. So I think I've always had a soft spot for enabling developers, because obviously I'm a software developer. I want to see people like myself thrive. And my initial goal was really to build something that was easy to consume as an API and kind of fun to use as a product. So traditionally with banks, when we had to kind of integrate and build our solution, we were left with the task of going through hundreds of pages of documentation and figuring out, for ourselves how to kind of integrate this into a solution. And no one should have to do that.
Oh, yes.
So when I think my idea was just to kind of abstract out all the complexity into something that's extremely simple, and then present it to the developer in such a way that they can start experimenting with new ideas and business models. So I guess for me, what I would love to see, and we're like extremely excited and obviously super happy to help out anyone who's interested, but we would love to see companies use our API to build like lasting businesses in Pakistan for the Pakistan market. So, you have obviously international companies in the US that are massive in scale, but for whatever reason, they can't expand into Pakistan or they can't expand internationally because their business model is a very local business model. But that's not to say that those same businesses couldn't exist in Pakistan and be tools for the Pakistani business model. So we're obviously going to continue to innovate on our side where we can to bring new payment methods into the country, like you mentioned, recurring billing, marketplace payments, stuff like that. But we can't obviously build everything. So we would obviously love to enable companies where they can and see what they can build on top of our solution.
That would be awesome. And yes, I would look forward to seeing our local developers or local agencies come up with solutions that utilize your platform, which is in turn utilizing several other existing pieces of the puzzle that are already there. At the end of the day, what all of us want is for anyone who wants to sell anything legal, obviously, online, to just be able to start selling it as soon as, practically as soon as, as easy as setting up a WordPress install, installing whatever plugin they need, and signing up on the payment gateway site, getting their API key, inserting the API key into the integration plugin, and voila, you're ready to sell. Like it has been in the financially civilized world, as I call it, for the past couple of decades, while we've been stuck in the financial stone age in this regard. So thank you very much for sharing all of this. And if you have a few more minutes, I would like to ask my audience if they have any questions. In fact, we've got some comments already. Ehsan is excited about today's show. Thank you very much, Ehsan. We're excited to have you as well. And Ibad is saying hello to Ziad Bhai.
Hey, Ibad.
And Munir Kamal is asking, Salam, informative show. Why all the meetups and shows that are targeted to locals use English? I mean, wouldn't it be more useful and reach masses if you provide or discuss all this useful info in Urdu? Just a thought. बहुत बहुत अच्छी बात की आपने, और बिल्कुल मैं इससे मुकम्मल तौर पे इत्तेफाक करता हूँ. एंड मैं माजरत चाहता हूँ कि मैंने आज का तकरीबन पूरा शो इंग्लिश में ही मैंने सवालात भी किए, और जब मैं इंग्लिश में सवाल करूंगा तो मेरे मेहमान भी, उनका ज़्यादा यही इम्कान होगा कि वो भी इंग्लिश ही में जवाब दें. तो ये आपने बहुत बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट रेज किया. मेरी कोशिश होगी कि बिल्कुल हमारी जो अपनी लोकल मार्केट के लिए जितने डिस्कशंस होती हैं, उनमें हम जितना ज़्यादा अपनी ज़ुबान का इस्तेमाल करें, तो ऐसे लोग जिन्हें इंग्लिश सुनने में समझने में इतनी आसानी नहीं होती, वो सब भी इससे उस मालूमात से मुस्तफ़ीद हो सकें. तो बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने ये मुझे याद दहानी कराई.
मेरी उर्दू थोड़ी सी कमजोर भी है, तो
जो भी यूट्यूब पर, फेसबुक पर, ट्विच पर तो मेरा होगी, लेकिन फेसबुक पे, यूट्यूब पे, लिंक्डइन पे अगर आप अभी हमें सुन रहे हैं और आपके कुछ किसी भी किस्म के सवालात हैं इस मौजू पे, तो प्लीज आप पूछिए. एंड
the other thing, I think it's just us two on air now. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us. And if you have any questions on Safepay, please just email us at either support@getsafepay.com or send us a Facebook message. We're very responsive, and as I mentioned earlier, we love hearing feedback from merchants who do use Safepay and those who want to use Safepay as well. And hopefully we'll have some exciting announcements coming in the next couple of weeks. So just stay tuned to what's going on at Safepay.
And if you're a software developer, reach out to me. I want to discuss some things. If you're thinking of building cool businesses that require payments, we'll be happy to help you guys. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Apologies, I think Haroon lost internet connection. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the show.
Allah Hafiz. Take care.
Allah Hafiz.